psychologists are human too. Just because I know the things that like I should do to take care of my mental health doesn't mean I do them 100% all the time. So, like, I know that, like, I have a tendency to overwork, to get stressed out about answering my emails in a really timely fashion, and that I feel a lot better when I exercise, right? So when I prioritize, like, taking walks in the
Awekenge, this is Mental Matters, hosted by Asagototo. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Mental Matters. I'm your host, Asagototo. And before we dive into today's incredible conversation, I have a small favor to ask. If you enjoy what you hear today, please take a moment to rate and review our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. Your feedback not only helps us improve, but also helps others discover the valuable insights we share every week. And if you find today's episode particularly inspiring or insightful, don't forget to share it with your friends, family, or anyone you think could benefit from it. Thank you for your support. It truly means the world to us. Now, let's get back into our conversation.
I just wanna dive into who are you and your background in terms of, firstly, can you start by telling us a little bit about your journey from being a self-described lazy person to becoming a successful academic? What inspired you to write about this transformation?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am a clinical psychologist. I have a small private practice, so I work with patients. And I'm also a psychology professor at the University of Kentucky. And basically, there, like, my main role is to do research on kind of developing new treatments for anxiety, depression, personality disorders, and then doing clinical trials to see if these new treatments work better than what we have before. So that's kinda like my, sort of my, like, current situation, and, you know, I right, like, I have described myself as, like, kind of a lazy, messy person which is a really big difference from how I operate now. And, there's not really any like specific event or milestone that like caused this epiphany. More I kind of changed behaviors here and there across my journey, and slowly cultivated more organization, more conscientiousness, right? Like, so kind of instead of taking a personality test and the personality test being like, well, you're disorganized, so you probably shouldn't have a job that has a lot of moving parts, right? Instead of using a personality test to kind of dictate what I'd be good at or what I should do, I feel like I kind of figured out what I wanted to do and then kind of nudged my personality in the direction that would help me be successful in that area. And so when I was a freshman in college, I was not a great student. I often didn't go to class and my performance was pretty like all over the place. And by chance I had enrolled in this introduction to psychology course, and despite it being at 8 a.m., so it was an early morning class, I got up and made myself go every single day. And I was rewarded by performing well in the first exam. And the teaching assistant pulled me aside and was like, Shannon, you really should consider majoring in psychology. And like that felt great, right? That was the push I needed to like keep working hard in that class, to declare my major, to take other psychology classes and work hard there. And it kind of changed how I thought about myself, right? So instead of thinking about myself as like, I don't know, I don't care, I'm not really like a good student, I kind of saw myself as somebody that's good at psychology. Um, and so that really kind of helped me perform well in those classes. But I still was like not going to some of my other classes, like my foreign language requirement, my like intro to bio, like those kinds of things. And I decided I really liked psychology. I was good at it. And I was really like kind of attuned to other people. So I knew that I knew pretty early on in studying this that I wanted to be a psychologist. I wanted to do therapy and to help people. And I went to a professor and told her, oh, I'm so excited. I think I'm going to go to grad school for this. And was really disappointed when she told me that because my grades were not consistently good, that I would have trouble getting into graduate school. And that was like so disappointing, obviously. But the whole point of having negative emotions is to motivate you to change your behavior, right? Like the purpose of feeling guilty is to let you know that how you were behaving before is not working for you and you should do something different. And so that really prompted me to start applying myself more consistent. And I, finally did get my GPA up, got into graduate school. Um, and graduate school was like really demanding. And so from there, I sort of think about this time I just went to the store and bought my first planner, right, to keep myself organized. And immediately writing down all my tasks, this just a sense of relief. And so I'm talking about all these like very small moments, right? Like buying a planner, getting feedback from a TA, getting a good grade here and there that really just like snowballed over time, changed the way I thought about myself. I'm a person that can get things done. I'm a person that's good at psychology. People are counting on me. And, over time, I changed the way, if you want to think about like a personality test, I mean, it would change the way I'd respond to questions, right? So are you organized? In high school, I probably would have circled the bubble. Well, not really, strongly disagree. Whereas now, because of these new behaviors that I've now maintained over time, I could, say, yeah, actually, I am organized. And so this is a like long winding description, but basically I I see people take these personality tests. Our employers give us these personality tests and they put us in a box. And that's not really what the science supports, right? Science says that our personality traits can change over time, that we can speed up that process using intentional behaviors. And I've seen that unfold in my own life. So that's what got me into personality change.
That's quite a long answer and a lot of things to pick up in terms of just what you said. I have a lot of questions in terms of that, and also like in terms of being able to tell yourself that I am gonna change in terms of I'm going to go to more classes, I'm going to focus on this and that and that. And you mentioned a plan. Sometimes it's very hard to change your ways because of certain habits. For example, you say that you brought a planner, and definitely it wasn't hard for you to have to go forward in terms of having this new mindset. How did you overcome any limitations, belief that you had about yourself and your abilities?
Yeah. So I think that is like taking steps that are manageable. I don't think that if I had bought a planner my freshman year of college that I would have like stuck with it and actually used it. I don't think it would have given me the relief and kind of mastery over my schedule that it gave me kind of like further on in my kind of trajectory of personality change. But like studying a little bit more for one test, right? Like that's something that feels doable, like something that I could sort of like break off and focus on. Like I'm going to study a little bit more for the first test in my this one psychology class. And when you do something that's manageable and it gets reinforced, right? Like you did well on the exam, I got that feedback from the TA. That is like kind of like the boost you need to then you know, do it again. Okay, well, that worked. So let me study a little bit more for my next psychology test. Right. And so it wasn't like this overnight change where I went from like really like, disorganized and messy and all over the place to like making a change in one area, getting some success, feeling good about that, solidifying that, and then, trying to apply it maybe in another area. And so for me, like this is all taking place over the span of years for me because I wasn't necessarily like, doing an intervention on myself. And it wasn't really intentional, in the way that I'm like, I'm setting out to be more organized, right? It's sort of like as I reflect on my, how I change, thinking about like, what are these moments where like doing something a little bit different got reinforced. So then I kind of kept down that path, like kind of changed my direction just a little bit.
Mm, 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 mm. And in terms of being able to, I would say that in terms of the thing you said that it was in a span of a year. A- And to me, I would feel it would be impossible because sometimes there are things that I am not, as you said earlier, that you were not focused on. For example, for me, being able to do awareness about mental health in general and talking to people like you here on this podcast, it's what I love. But currently, what I do for my daily life, I wouldn't say that I'm into and love it. So I agree with you when you said that sometimes you didn't take your other classes seriously, but when it came to psychology, you make sure that you did the work. And also another thing that I realized you mentioned that you're a professor, and also how did you go from being shy to becoming comfortable speaking in front of large audiences? What strategies did you use to build your confidence?
Yeah. So I think it's my role as a therapist and as I mean, basically, whenever you do something for the first time, it's usually pretty scary. And that's true of public speaking. Some people are naturally more outgoing, and so it's not quite as scary. Other people are probably more introverted than I am or was, and it's more scary. But the idea is that we have these beliefs about like what will happen when we try to do it. And, oh, like I'll lose my train of thought. People will be able to tell that I'm nervous, right? And the only way to kind of like test that hypothesis is to actually do the thing, right? And so it kind of got to the point in my career where, like, to be successful, I had to network at conferences. I had to like interview and like for jobs, right? And like
Yeah.
give a good impression. I had to get up in front of undergrads and teach. I mean, frankly, getting up in front of undergrads is somewhat hard. It could be harder, than getting up in front of like peers and colleagues because you never know what kids are going to say. Um, but basically, you just do it over and over and over again. And when nothing bad happens, then that's reinforcing, right? Like you learn, oh, like the things that I thought would happen when I got up in front of people, well, they didn't. And so next time I get up in front of people, I'll be like a little bit less nervous.
Mm. Yeah, that's a very fascinating way to look at it in terms of being able to firstly talk to a small group, then and work your way into talking to a large crowd of people. And I'm saying this as a pretty outgoing person, but it is always being nervous of talking in public because first like the first time I did talk in public was last year when I had a launch of my book, and I was shaking in terms of I couldn't even hold the mic properly. And one thing that I've realized in terms of public speaking is the fact that people will always see you shaking. People will always see you nervous because as much as some of those people might be proud of you, some of those people might ask you, why are you shaking? And I believe that public speaking is one of the hardest things that you could do. I 100% believe that. And I just want to go into personal change and development. You suggest that, I think it's on the profile, if I'm not mistaken, you suggest that personality is not fixed and that we can intentionally develop the characteristics we need to be successful. Can you elaborate on this idea and how it was played out in your life, in your own life? It has sort of played.
Yeah. Well, so one of the things that you asked me, right, is kind of the relationship between mental health and personality. And so that's like kind of what got me into personality change as like a research area and then got me sort of reflecting on my own personality change. So, like I mentioned, I'm a treatment development researcher. And basically, this is going to be another long-winded answer, but basically, um the gold standard for treating anxiety, depression, other disorders is that there's like a manual or a treatment for every disorder that we have, right? So there's a panic disorder treatment and a social anxiety treatment and a generalized anxiety treatment and a depression treatment. And it's really a pain in the neck for therapists because you have to learn 40 different treatments. And, it's a pain in the neck for patients because most patients come to therapy with more than one condition. So, like, you have to kind of treat them sequentially, and that just takes longer and is, again, kind of a pain. And so I got interested in personality because there's so much good research that suggests that certain personality traits are risk factors for developing certain conditions, right? So the personality trait of neuroticism, which refers to the tendency to experience negative emotions, to take longer to calm back down, you get upset, that's associated with anxiety, depression, eating disorders, borderline personality disorder. And so I kind of thought, and I'm not the only one that has had this thought. I've worked with a team and, others have talked about this too. But like, wouldn't it be more efficient to target the vulnerability, like that personality trait that puts people at risk for a range of symptoms rather than try to you know, play whack-a-mole with the different disorders at the symptom level. And so we developed a treatment for neuroticism, right? This tendency to experience negative emotions. And in any good clinical trial, we're measuring our outcomes. And what we see is that we see these big changes in people's tendency to experience negative emotions, a personality trait, during cognitive behavioral therapy. And so there are other personality traits, conscientiousness or disinhibition, right? Like that is related to like more impulsive disorders. So often like people that use substances tend to be higher in disinhibition. We see difficulties with like extroversion, which a lot of people just kind of associate with like being sociable, but really it's about like experiencing like positive emotions and excitement. And so people with depression often have deficits in extroversion. Um, so anyway, basically, there's 5 domains of personality: neuroticism, extroversion, conscientiousness, agreeableness, and openness. Those it's like we're not very creative in my field, so we call them the big 5 personality traits. And basically, they all confer risk for different mental health disorders. And so again, wouldn't it be more efficient if therapists could learn 5 treatments and be able to treat everything versus learn 40 different treatments? And so that's what got me interested in personality change, right? And then my research and research from like tons of other people show a lot of support for this notion that the personality changes over time. It changes naturally. So as people get older, they tend to, on average, experience fewer negative emotions and more positive ones. They tend to be more conscientious. They tend to put more value in relationships, and they tend to be less judgmental. And that when we actually target these personality domains in therapy, that we can see 20 years worth of personality change in 20 weeks.
Mm. Mm. That's fascinating in terms of changing personality. Actually, my second question go within personal change and development goes that what do you respond to people who are saying that having a personality change is impossible or not authentic enough?
Yeah. So What I would say to that is that, we define personality as our characteristic way of thinking, feeling, and behaving. And so people can be really like precious about personality. Oh my gosh, you can't change your personality. It's the core of who you are. But we can change. I mean, people change how they think about situations. They change how they feel about things in their lives, and they change their habits or their behaviors all the time. And so when you really break personality down to like what you think, what you feel, and what you do, like those are changeable, right? Like
Yeah.
when you think about like filling out a personality questionnaire, right? Like, I mean, they're basically just asking you, what do you generally do in situations like this? And that's something that we can change.
Mm. Sure. I'm just fascinating in terms of this thing of personality change, and I never did look at it in that sense I because for example, if I do a questionnaire, let's say in terms of I went to a restaurant and I have this questionnaire, I won't answer it the way would answer in terms of the questionnaire that I have for mental health. In terms of it's very fascinating, and it's something that I believe that I need to look upon into. I think so. I need to do my research on it. Would you mind sending me some papers that you wrote?
Sure.
Um, and as a psychologist, a clinical psychologist, you spent years researching and developing cognitive behavior treatments for anxiety, depression, and personality disorders. How do you apply this research to your own life and personal growth?
Yeah. I mean, well, that's a great question. I guess if I'm honest, I will say inconsistently. So like apply these things to right? Like psychologists are human too. Like just because I know the things that like I should do to take care of my mental health doesn't mean I do them 100% all the time. So, like, I know that, like, I have a tendency to, like, overwork, to get stressed out about answering my emails in a really timely fashion, and that I feel a lot better when I exercise, right? So when I prioritize, like, taking walks in the morning and, like, I'll get to my emails when I get to them, right? And, like, taking weekends off. And so usually I'm pretty good about that. Like, I know that these are the things that sort of work for me. And, I'm usually pretty good about it. Sometimes though, like something will happen, right? I'll have like a grant deadline or I'll be I don't know, just like especially busy at the end of the semester like it is now. And I'll sort of get back into the habit of like working after I get home, after I put my kids to bed, like going back and answering emails in the night, right? And I'm always like whenever I do this, and like I'll go months like really just kind of doing the things that I know are healthy for me. And then I'll do something like this and I'm like, why am I so tired? Like, why do I feel so crappy? Why don't I feel refreshed in the morning when I wake up? And it's like, oh, yeah, because I'm not reading for pleasure before I go to bed. I'm like on my computer until, it's like I know the things that I need to do. And I think this is true for everybody, right? Like, I mean, most people know that like drinking to feel better when you're upset is not great for you, right? But like it's easy to fall back on old habits. And so one of the biggest pieces of advice that I give people is like you're going to mess up. You're not supposed to be perfect. And when you mess up, like for me, like overworking in this case, like notice. Don't beat yourself up about it and just do the things that you need to do that work because we all mess up.
Mm, 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 mm. That's a fascinating thing because I would say that I, I relate to that thing of being able to say, I, like you, I do overwork because I believe that I have work. If I don't have work, in terms of, let's say, for example, my goal for this podcast is to reach people that struggle when it comes to mental health, have that knowledge that I didn't have when I did struggle with my own mental health issues. So if I stop now, who will do that now? Who will do that here? for example, I'm in South Africa. So in South Africa, I wouldn't say that most people talk about mental health in general. It's still that big stigma around mental health, not only mental health, but also disability. So my, that's my goal on pushing those things. I love the fact that you said that you're gonna mess up, because
Yeah.
some people don't realize that it's okay to mess up, because you mess up and you learn from it, and not stuck in that thing of I failed and I don't know what's the next step, what next step I'm gonna take. So I just thank you for saying that you're gonna mess up, and also um just I'm seeing that we almost up with in terms of time. What message do you hope your readers take away from your book and your story of personal information? The transformation. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Um, don't let a personality test put you in a box and tell you who you can be. Let your dreams, your goals, your values dictate the traits, the characteristics that you purposefully cultivate.
I love that, and also I believe that your specific episode, as much as it had some long answers and short answers, I really loved it, because it has shown me something new in terms of when it comes to personality, in terms of personality as a whole, because I didn't know that sometimes personality can affect in terms of cultivating success, in terms of how it can look upon in terms of mental health, and I didn't know the link between those two things. So I really appreciate your time for being here with me, and also thank you for your knowledge in just in general, and the energy that you brought about in this specific episode. Thank you so much for that.
Free audio post production by alphonic.com.